I think we're live. Are we live? Let me know if you can hear me, if you can see me by leaving a comment or giving this stream a like. Hey, welcome everyone. It's been a week. It's hard to believe. It feels like it's been 3 months since we last spoke. The days have been just extremely packed. I've done a ton of things. Today, I've been up since 6. And it's now, what is it, 7 p.m. So I've been up for I've been at my desk for 13 hours, which is a little bit unhealthy, probably. So don't follow my example. Hey, Margot. Hey, saw your message. I'm so sorry to hear that. Wow. Definitely keep you in my prayers. And let's hope for the best. Welcome to all of you who are watching this on one of my YouTube channels. Would be lovely if you could say hi and tell me your name so I can call you out. So we've got DKT4377 and Marion is there too. Hand pink waving. What is that? Hand pink waving. Is that like that? Peter is there too. And Heyburner 1969 is there too. Jeannie, good to see you. It's always helpful to have the real names as well, because sometimes I can talk to someone thinking it's a stranger, and then it turns out I've known that person for 20 years. Hey, Eine Baumige. Welcome. So we're watching this, or you are watching this on one of my YouTube channels. I've posted a link on Facebook as well, but usually we don't get much traffic from Facebook anyway, because it takes forever for those posts to show up in people's feeds. But I'm streaming this out to my anime channel on YouTube, so if you are an anime fan, welcome. We can talk anime. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're probably on my main channel. And if you like books and reading and you're interested in following my writer's journey, then maybe you're watching this on my books channel. Whatever you are, wherever you are, whatever channel you're on, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And that really helps. Hey, we've got Steve as well from San Diego. Good to see you. DKT is wondering if I watched the Andor show. Yes, it's the best Star Wars since the movies. I really loved it. Oh, pink waving hand. The color of the hand is pink. I thought it was you talking about the pinky, because I don't see the icon, or what is it, the emoji apparently. So I have to rely on the description. Hello, MJ Bergen. Good to see you. MJ's following me on the books channel, which, by the way, if you haven't discovered that yet, you may actually want to check it out, because that's the place where all the cool stuff happens right now. So if you look for Father Roderick -books on YouTube, you will see this stream, so you can just hop over there and subscribe. And what I do is, so I'm writing this fantasy novel, in case you had missed it, which I don't think it's possible, because I spam the world with multiple updates per day, because that's how much I love doing this. And the fantasy novel is supposed to come out in the summer. At least that's my very ambitious goal. And I'm currently, the working title, and probably also the real title, is going to be The Dawn of the Story Mages. And it's a story that takes place in early medieval Ireland, but it's a magical Ireland. And there's lots of stuff happening that is extremely exciting and very mysterious. And there's a lot that I try to hide in that story. We've got Fove as well. Good morning. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Probably not. And but it's so I forced myself. I promised on January the 1st that I would do daily updates. And it was not really because of the channel. Nobody was subscribed to the channel at that moment. It's just for myself. So I would tell myself, hey, after you have written your portion for today, for that day, you have to tell people about it. So that really helped in forcing me to basically continue this endeavor. Otherwise, if it had been just this idea that I had, if nobody knows, it's very easy to give up on it. It's like telling yourself on January the 1st, I will go to the gym every single day, but you don't tell anyone. 2 weeks later, you're probably on the couch eating a bag of potato chips, at least if you're me. Peter wants to know, as a Star Trek fan, can I be here? Yes, you can. It's just that I don't post much about Star Trek on my main YouTube channel, and that's because of Paramount. It's because of the owners of the franchise, because they always slap you with copyright claims. So if I show anything from Star Trek, immediately gets flagged and I get a copyright claim. So I just gave up. I was like, okay, dude, I'm just giving you free publicity. If you don't want it, I'll just make publicity for Star Wars. And I'm sad because I love Star Trek. If you pronounced it correctly. It is French, yeah, fauve. And it's beautiful. It's always problematic if you have a name that is from elsewhere and then it gets bastardized. Like my last, that's why I always use Father Roderick, because my last name, look it up. It's like, people think it's a strange, like expensive type of ice cream, Von Heugen. Will your story have a lot of Irish fantasy lore? Please forgo the inclusion of leprechauns because that's been done to them. No leprechauns. Leprechauns weren't a thing in the early medieval times. No, what I am actually doing is I'm showing, because the early medieval times, that's when the monastic life came up and the first missionaries started to evangelize. But of course, they had to deal with the existing mythology. And so my story is literally on the cutting edge of this transition from ancient Irish mythology that also sometimes goes back to the 1,000 years before Christ. And then the new stories that started to emerge. And in my fantasy version of Ireland, those are two realities. And there's a bit of everything, and it all comes together in the story. And it's super exciting. I mean, it gives me a lot of freedom, and it also allows me to tell a spiritual story. So I'm trying to follow the example of the Irish monks, who were very keen on integrating the existing culture into their evangelization instead of positioning it as that's all wrong and that's all evil and it should be eliminated. I think one of the reasons that they were so successful was that they basically just took what was already there and just gave it a twist. They just put it in a pan and cooked with it. And that's what I'm trying to do with my book as well. So Star Trek. I was looking for the Section 31 movie because everybody was talking about it online. And to my great surprise and dismay, I couldn't watch it anywhere. It's not in theaters. It's not on Netflix. It's not on what do I have here? We don't have Paramount Plus, but we have Sky something. They have all the Star Trek, but not Section 31. It wasn't on Prime. It was nowhere to be found. HBO Max, nothing. And so apparently they didn't release it in Europe, which maybe is a good thing, because everyone that I heard talking about Section 31, which is of course about this kind of opposite universe with everyone who's good in the Star Trek timeline has an evil counterpart. It's a thing that came actually from the original series, as far as I've heard. And then, of course, this was a big thing in the first season of Discovery, where one of the captains is killed, and then her evil counterpart takes over. And then this story is all about that Section 31. And from what I understand, but I have to say, I think a lot of the kind of more modern aspects of Section 31 are part of Deep Space Nine and that storyline. But I haven't finished watching that series yet, so it's a bit difficult for me to gauge what Section 31 is supposed to be compared to what it actually is portrayed to be in Section 31. But anyone I heard talking about it says it is a horrible movie. It is so incredibly bad. And it also destroys the lore. It's a big failure. And I'm talking about, real Trekkies who love the franchise, but they hate the movie. I'm baffled. that they managed to release a movie that is so universally hated. I was like, does no one do any form of quality control? Didn't they do like target groups, or what is it, like test audiences with Star Trek fans? It's 2025. If the movie is objectively bad, there is no amount of advertising and marketing that you can do to change people's opinion, because everybody's talking about it on TikTok, on YouTube, on the social networks. What were they thinking? Who is greenlighting this stuff? It has always baffled me. Warner, it's kind of similar what they do with the Harry Potter franchises, like the last few movies of Fantastic Beasts. I liked the first one, but then the second and the third one were just so bad, so disappointing. Who greenlights that stuff? Why do they keep spending all that money? Because these movies are not cheap to make. The actors that they hire are sometimes like top tier actors, so they must pay them so much. And then the story is terrible, the dialogue is terrible. Everybody hates it. Why? I don't get it. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. DKT has seen it. I was extremely disappointed with Section 31. Struggled to identify where was Star Trek in that film. It was just a bad sci-fi movie. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just stunning that those like bad scripts, etc., are not stopped in advance. I mean, they're losing millions and millions and millions. And the end result is just a degradation of the brand. I mean, at least Star Wars has also kind of made a lot of mistakes, but at least now they said, okay, let's take our time. Let's make sure that the next movie is loved and everybody likes it. Even on TV now with Skeleton Crew and Andor, season 2, they've got 2, I think, solid series there that everybody seems to like. And that's the way to go. Now, let's hope that Star Trek will course correct. I am looking forward to Strange New Worlds. That, for me, has been the saving grace of modern Star Trek. It is one of my favorite television series, including Star Wars, including everything else that's on TV. Strange New World, that is a ship where I would like to serve, even as a red shirt. I wouldn't mind. It's just, I love these people. I love that crew. And my favorite episode? It's going to shock you, but it's the musical episode. I still listen to those songs and I sing along almost every day. I'm the X, sings Spock. I love it. Anyway, yeah, Section 31. Also, why is it not released here in Europe, or at least in my country? Where is it? Everybody's talking about it, and now they got all the negative buzz, so the moment it comes out, everybody already has a negative impression, a negative opinion. Are they counting on us, like reacting like, oh, it was actually not as bad as people said it would be? I have no clue. It probably more likely has to do with all the franchise holders and the money. It's always about money and not about art. Oh well, poor Star Trek writers. You cannot CGI over a bad screenplay. That is true. It's similar to writing, by the way. If I may make a small comparison, sometimes you have these amazing looking covers. So you buy a book just because the cover looks so cool, and then you start reading and you're like, oh, this is so bad. This is so terrible. But the cover looks great. Well, I would never buy like the sequel to that book. Hey, Michiel, good to see you. Are you still working? Oh my goodness. Michiel is monitoring weather-related events in Scotland, or maybe something else. I don't know. I searched for Y in my calculation. I did not even know about that line. That is so funny. Amazing. By the way, for those of you that are part of my private community, of my paid community as sponsors, Michiel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Michiel is going to host like a video session on the website, fatherroderick.com. So that's different from this because I'm doing YouTube, because it's easier for me to reach everyone, and then people can watch it later on. But we do our community meeting where people can just be in the part of the meeting with their webcam and talk, which unfortunately is the downside of this system. So I can read what you write. That's why I love that you leave me comments and ask questions. But you can't really talk to me, or at least not verbally, and I can't see you. For some, that may actually be an advantage. And that's going to be at 7:30 Universal Time. What was it again? It's Greenwich time, right? So yeah, I'm 1 hour ahead. This is why I do this chat at 7, because I noticed that this is a good time for me, because then I still have about 2 hours before I go to bed, and I can just like quietly read in my corner. I'm so behind on reading. It's not funny anymore. I've had like an extremely busy week, and then these last 2 days I've been catching up on the writing, and so I wrote 3,000 words today, which was pretty good, exactly on target, but that leaves me with so little time to do anything else, and so I'm hoping to start reading again. I love reading, and I was used to reading like 3 or 4 books per week. Now I have not read a single book this entire year. It's already February, so I'm starting to worry. I'm currently reading a super popular book, which is totally not written for me. But I read it almost to study it and to also see if I can connect with the audience, which is huge because this is one of the biggest sellers in the world. And I want to figure out how I can find an audience that, I don't know, connect to that audience somehow. But it's the fourth wing. Everybody who I asked, should I read it, said no, please, Father, don't. It is not written for priests. It is quite vulgar, quite graphic. And then there's this other book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and that is kind of similar. So there's a lot of nudity in there and worse. Now, obviously, people always kind of project an image on me, where it's like, oh, I'm going to be so upset. And like, yeah. You know, as a priest, you hear confessions. There's not much that surprises me anymore. But I'm looking at the book more from a point of view of how is it written well? Can I learn something from this? Can I kind of figure out what makes this genre work so well? And what can I take from that experience for my own writer's journey? And can I do better? Because obviously I have a lot of comments on certain elements of the book. Hey, Arika, good to see you. Great writers are good readers. That's true. And probably vice versa. I've always been a good reader. I never thought I would be a good writer. But I'm starting to find my mojo in writing. What I did not know, I knew I could write. I can tell a story. I do that all the time as a podcaster, as a preacher. I've already written a nonfiction book, like my own memoirs with Geek Priest, and the Dutch version of that. But I was unsure if I would actually enjoy writing fantasy. I love reading it, and I like the people. I like the world around fantasy books. But I just didn't know if I had it in me. And now that I'm writing, I am. It feels. I said this in the video that I recorded earlier today. It truly feels like magic. Like I plan everything out. I had taken the entire month of January to plot the story, come up with do some world building, figure out what the characters would do and what they wanted and how they would succeed. I even created an overview of the first 10 chapters of the book so I could start actually drafting. And I'm now in chapter 2, and the story is completely off the rails. And it just happened. I was just writing, and then my characters are starting to act independently of me. And I'm like, looking like, what the heck are you guys doing? What's going on? And it's so surprising. It is seriously, there were moments where I was sitting here in front of my computer or my screen here, and I was like, wait, a dragon? Where does that come from? Wait, what? He's attacking who? It's so crazy. And yet, it feels like I'm watching a movie. So I'm very entertained by my own story, which sounds kind of narcissistic. But it's true. I was like, I cannot believe how fun it is to see this story emerge. And where does it come from? I have no idea. But it is a lot of fun. And then, of course, obviously, I am kind of I see the story, but I still have to write it down. And I have to make sure that I write it well. And that is... that's kind of that's the hard part of writing, because obviously, as you can tell, I'm not a native speaker, and even though I've got a pretty good vocabulary, especially in spoken language, I do not have any experience in writing prose. Is that how you call it? And writing dialogue, for instance, or writing scenes or describing stuff. And I noticed that there are things that I actually do quite well, and I'm surprised, especially dialogue. That kind of works. It just flows. It feels natural. I usually read it out loud, and I think, yeah, that sounds like real dialogue. So that's not too hard. I also don't struggle that much with the, let's say, the pacing of the story. What I did struggle with, that was my first real bump on the road. So at one point, so the main characters, in case you haven't followed my writer's journal, the story is about a monk, or actually a novice. So he's an apprentice monk, you could say, and a nun, but she's also a novice, so she's an apprentice nun, and they're siblings. So Tai, who is the main character, has a younger brother who is deaf, and has a very, very fragile health. And his parents have brought him to the monastery, so in the hopes that the monks could take better care of him than they could, because they have to work on a farm all day long. And so Tai takes his little brother under his wing, and then you've got Orla, and Orla is kind of the same age as Tai. She's had a very troubled youth, and she entered the monastery together with her sister. Her sister is Neve, and Neve is much more easygoing. She's a little bit, like, how do you say that? More introverted, but also very, very kind, very homely, and the kind of the opposite of her older sister, who's always fighting against something, fighting against herself, fighting against the system, fighting against her parents. And so so that's kind of the setting. It takes place in that monastery. In the monastery, there is a group of monks who work in a magical tower, and they do magic stuff there. It's not really important what, but anyway, that's the setting. And then there is also a nemesis that I had planned to be introduced further down the road, and he showed up today. He was like there all of a sudden. Plus, he was being attacked by a dragon. And then Tai, who wants to, like, what is the need of Tai? Tai wants to become a scribe. He knows that there's magic in that tower, and he thinks that if he becomes a scribe, maybe he can use that magical power to heal his brother. So it's a very altruistic reason for him to strive to become a scribe. And he is frustrated by the fact that the abbot, who is a very like Snape-like type guy, refuses to give permission to the story mages, the monks that the scribes, to use magic on their own community. And Tai doesn't understand. And so he's like, okay, I need to learn that magic because I want to help my brother. And so that's the story. So there, all of a sudden, there's a dragon attack. And who is the person who was being attacked? It is the bad guy. But we don't know that it's the bad guy. But I know. Well, I know. You don't know. Now you know. And who is protecting him against the dragon? It is Tai. And it turns out that Tai actually has magical gifts. And it's probably something he inherited of his grandparents, who were not Christian. So his parents were the first generation of Christians, but his grandparents were Druids, or I don't know. And so apparently there's something of that heritage also in Thai, but you can imagine that that is going to be a problem because it's pagan. It's not sanctioned. It doesn't follow the rules. So it becomes a liability. So anyway, lots of tension. But I was so surprised. And plus, I also discovered today that the bad guy is actually really good looking. I'm not thinking that, but Orla thinks that he's really good looking. And she's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a nun. I'm not supposed to look at his strong arms. I'm planting a seed there because these two will, well, there's a lot going to happen in the rest of the story between those two. MJ says, characters have a mind of their own. That's how I know characters beginning to really work. It's when they start subverting my authority as a writer. Exactly. I felt like the abbot, but nobody obeys me. But I enjoy it at the same time. I'm also looking at that. Those are my children who are like, what? Surprising me all the time. It's so much fun. Dialogue is stylized speech, certainly. Most of writing is rewriting. I totally know that is going to be my fate. So this is a first draft. Way back when, 2 months ago, before I started this project, I totally thought that I could just write the draft and then publish it. Yeah. No, that's not going to happen. And I don't want that because actually I think that the editing process is going to be the phase where I learn the most, because that's when you are going to look with other people to every single aspect of the story. And even when I'm writing now, when I'm having lunch or whatever, I'm always watching TikToks and YouTubes of writers with tips. And so it's accelerated learning, and that hopefully helps me to at least get the worst stuff out of the first draft, or keep the worst stuff out of the first draft, the beginner's mistakes. But I have no doubt that there's still a lot of work to be done. But what is most important for me now is that the story works. And if the story works, all the rest is basically tinkering. DKT says, so you don't take the Stephen King approach, you just sit down and write without planning out the story. I did outline my plot, yeah. Very rough strokes, because I ran out of time. It's not because I didn't want to, but it was like, okay, I need to stop this, because otherwise I'll still be plotting in December. But there's, I think, a misconception when it comes to Stephen King. People, and he himself kind of always says, oh, I just sit down and I write and I don't have to plan. And I'm thinking, you can do that because you're super experienced. So you do work with rules and you know what you're doing. And that is so different from someone who's just beginning like me. And I know myself. It's like I cannot be a discovery writer at this stage, at least not entirely, because it would result in a terrible story. So I'm actually following very, very strict rules when it comes to the overall composition and pace of the story. So that is why I worked so hard on like this 40 chapter structure of the outline, so that going through all these 40 chapters, I knew exactly what each chapter needed to accomplish. And that prevents me from writing and just disappearing in the world, and then later on having to throw everything away because it doesn't serve the story. With this overall structure, at least I know that if I just stick with the goal of that particular chapter, and it can vary, I see this now, like the way in which I have realized the goal of chapter 2 is so different from what I planned just a few days ago. But nevertheless, I know I can still just trust myself, because I know what the end result has to be of chapter 2, and then I can just go to chapter 3 and continue the process. I don't think I'll get in trouble there. And then there is still a large part of the story kind of after the call to adventure, that I is very, very rough in my mind. I know that they are going to leave the monastery and enter. They're going to go on a quest. So they need to recover something important. And the middle part, so Act 2 and Act 3, are all going to be about this journey with, the four siblings, and then also some new people that will join the group temporarily or permanently. And they are going to first be very successful, and then they're going to fail miserably, and everything is going to go haywire. And at the end of Act 3, everything seems lost. And then Act 4, obviously, is the big finale where I'm working my way towards the happy end. So I know pretty well how I want to do the fourth act, but the second and the third, I have no clue. I just know kind of that I want it to be a bit of I call them my Scooby-Doo chapters. So they are going to travel Ireland, and in various towns and situations, they're gonna find the kind of the double spy. So the evil mages have planted agents all over the country, and so our team is going to find them and try to eliminate them, and vice versa, of course, because the evil people soon start to get information about these young people that are constantly thwarting their plans. So that obviously is going to result in some action on their part. Let's see, what else have we got? The Fourth Wing is my least favorite book I've ever read. I just did not enjoy it overall, but I did like the dragons. Yeah, the dragons. I've only read 11 chapters now, so the writer is still working towards the big encounter with the dragons. It kind of takes a long time, but I think it's actually, it's decent. It's pretty well written. It's just that all those romantic moments, I'm thinking like, oh, girl, seriously, how can you be so obsessed with men when you're actually about to get killed all the time? It's just not realistic at all. But I guess that's because she's writing for a different audience. Do you favor plot-driven stories or character-driven stories? I'm definitely more of a character-driven story fan. Although if there's no good plot, the plot for me is the hook. But what I read for is, what happens to the characters. And my story is very much focusing on the transformation of my characters, and I have very specific ideas. I spent most of my time in January thinking about my characters and not so much about the plot. The plot is okay, dragons, magic, yeah, I'll figure it out. But the characters, that's much harder to do. Let's see. Orla sounds a lot like Margot. Yeah, I think I've written Orla based on actually a couple of women that I know. And this is the wonderful thing about writing characters, is you can, and that's why maybe it's easier for me now, because I'm 56. And I've encountered a lot of different people in my life. And as a priest, I've had many, many conversations with so many different people. And so that helps a lot in finding, like, what makes this person tick and how can I portray this person? And also to make it relevant. Because a good character development requires struggle, and struggle needs to be about important things. And so being a little bit older helps me with that kind of life experience to write more believable characters. And obviously there's also a little bit of me in a lot of them. And especially with Ty. Now, I don't identify that much with Ty, but Ty is almost like an earlier version of me. And he's struggling more, I think, in certain respects and less in other aspects. But his big thing is basically is rules. So he has been brought up in strict obedience, and he has taught himself that just sticking to the rules and keeping your head down, that is what's going to help you survive. But it's not going to help you thrive. And so in order to become a hero and a leader, he will have to face the tension between the rules and those that enforce the rules, and his own intuition and his dreams and desires and even natural gifts. He has lived a life, and he's still tempted for most of the story to suppress his intuition. He doesn't trust himself, and he's afraid. He's very afraid that if he is truly himself, everybody will hate him. And he will be punished, and will be end of the story. And that will have consequences not just for him, but more importantly for his little brother. And that is why he always ducks. Whereas Orla is total opposite. She's a fighter. She has had to fight for most of her life to survive her childhood and everything. And now she is in a horrible nunnery where Mother Superior or Mother Abbess is just this awful, so vindictive, nasty old woman. And so Orla is a rebel. She's like, okay, so I escaped the system of my youth, and now I'm in a church system, and it's even worse. How do I get out of that? Well, there's only one way for her, and that is to fight. So she will have to face the temptation of always using violence, verbal violence, and assertiveness to solve situations. Sometimes you just have to be meek and mild and forgiving. That's not in her system at all. So, yeah. And then, of course, there's this third guy, this good-looking, handsome, bad guy. And he's using those flaws. He's going to manipulate the both of them. But what he doesn't realize is that because he hangs out with them, they influence him much more than he first thought they would. And over time, he is the one who is going to change the most. But oh, I love that dynamic. It's so full of opportunities. Let's see, what else have we got here? Did you ever hear about story structure called Kishotenketsu? Kishotenketsu. No, I've not heard of that. Is this Japanese, obviously? But yeah, tell me about it. DKT wants to know, will you give your protagonist a personal quirk, like a nervous tic or stutter when he speaks, in order to express part of their personality? No. He just speaks Old Irish like everyone, which, by the way, is challenging because there is quite a bit of Old Irish in the story, but I also have to make it sound natural and translate it so people understand what's going on. My protagonist is the one thing that he knows that no one else can do is, well, first of all, of course, he's developed this sign language to communicate with his little brother. His little brother has a lot of like handicaps and, just being deaf and all that. But I think the biggest secret of Tai is that he actually has magical powers. And then he has to somehow deal with that, because it's forbidden to use that kind of magic, because it's not authorized magic. Orla sounds super tough on the outside and soft on the inside. Well, she is insecure. She's so bruised and beaten up until this moment in the story, that the only way in which she has ever learned to survive is by being strong and by using humor. She's got a good sense of humor, which I did not know either. I discovered that this morning. She has this kind of cynical humor. She's very like, I really like her sense of humor. And so, and her sister also, by the way, the two have this really great rapport, even though they're very different. But humor is also, in a way, it's a way to deflect emotions and to survive in a tense situation. And so she uses words anger, her, strength but for her, every day is a fight. And everyone is a potential enemy because she doesn't know how to relate to normal people. And that is why she's so vulnerable when she discovers this handsome guy and who is very much like her. He too, at least in the way he presents himself, he's a rebel. He is daring. He doesn't like the system. He wants to break things and then rebuild them. And she's like very, very, very interested in that kind of. Like he's not. Someone told me he sounds a bit like Kylo Ren, but he's not. Kylo Ren is actually a jerk. He's not likable at all. That was one of my issues that I had with the sequel movies. It's like, okay, Rey, why is there this romantic tension between the two of you? It doesn't make sense because Kylo Ren is just so different from you. And yeah, I don't see it. It's just weird. But then again, as a child, I didn't understand why Leia would fall for Han Solo and not for Luke Skywalker. For me, it was like, seriously, Han Solo? I don't like that guy at all. As a child, I always hated Han Solo. I thought it was unjust. Luke and Leia, they should be married. Thankfully, George Lucas had other ideas. Otherwise, it would have been very, very painful. Will there be any romantic elements in the story? Will Orla or Neve get involved in any of the other characters? Well, what I just told you, Orla is a bit smitten by this rogue stranger. But she's a nun, right? She has already, well, maybe she hasn't done her temporal vows yet, but she is still in this whole, time. That's what the novitiate is. Did I pronounce that correctly? Novices are still in this time of discernment, and the same is true for Ty and his brother as well. I mean, it's a lot can happen. The thing is, I don't know. I actually asked people in my video today, like, what do you want? Do you want her to break her vows and fall in love, or do you want the pious version where she heroically renounces all these emotions, and will she stay true to her vocation as a nun? Can go both ways. I haven't decided yet, but I don't think I should be the one who decides. I think it's Orla, but yeah, who knows? I'm definitely going to play with it, that's for sure. Are you integrating gender expectations of that time, or are you kind of leaving that part alone? No, very much so. It's like this is one of the big issues that Orla has. The first scene where she's introduced, so the boys all get to play outside, literally. So Ty is shepherding. So he's out in the fields with his little brother, and it's beautiful weather. It's springtime, and they're in the sun, and all the other monks are also in the field and, working on the land and sowing and all that. And then we meet Orla after they've left the dormitory. Orla enters with a heavy bucket full of water, and her sister as well, and they have to clean the floor in the dark, and it's cold inside because, thick walls and everything. And the two are like commiserating at the beginning of the story, like, look at us, how lucky are we that the both of us were girls when we were, because, oh my goodness, we wouldn't want to have that horrible life outside there in the fields with the sheep, and oh my goodness, these poor boys. No, this is so much more fun. And so they're very ironic, of course. And so we're going to see a lot of the way in which especially Orla was raised as the oldest of the family, where she's basically supposed to be a slave, and then she has different aspirations. And at one point, there's even a possibility that she too may become a scribe. But then it's refused. She's stopped because she's a woman. And then there's going to be this monk, this mentor, who is going to break the rules, and he's going to train her in secret. So, but for that to work, she needs to be able to enter the tower not as a girl. So there's going to be some cross dressing. I'm telling you, this is going to surprise quite a few people. But it's all grounded. It is. There's always an in-world explanation for what happens. But it's a bit like the Yentl story, if you've ever seen that movie with Barbara Streisand. You know, she has ambitions, but she knows that she can only realize her true vocation and what she feels called to if she literally kind of steps out of her role as the obedient woman and just pretends to be a man, at least for her the time as an apprentice. Hey, the nether side is there too. Hi, what's going on? Oh, we're just chatting. I was just telling people about what happens in my fantasy novel, and we were just brainstorming a little bit, and I was gathering some reactions. Margot says, can it end up being more of a platonic kind of love? Certainly, it can be ultimately end in a platonic kind of love. But I think it's much more interesting if it's real. I mean, she's a young woman, you know, and she sees this very attractive dude. Yeah, it's still her hormonal life has a mind of its own, and so she's going to have to face that. So I want my characters to feel real. I don't want to create like these pious know-it-alls always on their knees. That's the kind of story that I wouldn't read myself. But I like that the things ultimately that they do depend on their choices. You can have feelings, you can have a past, you can have traumas even, but ultimately you are called to be the one who is in charge. And that is what my characters all have to learn. Ty has to learn that to become a leader. Orla has to learn that in order to determine her own future, but to really choose it herself instead of following whatever people expect of her. And even the bad guy will have to make a very fundamental choice at the end of the story. Is he going to, you know, what is going to be his allegiance? And I'm actually being inspired by an anime that I'm currently watching, which is called oh golly, what is it called? It's about this guy who used to be an assassin and now has a family, and he's gained some weight. Let's put it that way. Okotaku days. Well, I'm so lousy with these Japanese names. Anyway, so but then there's this younger boy who used to be his co-assassin, who is now tasked to murder him because he chose for his family and stepped out of the crime syndicate. And you see over time, you see that this boy is discovering that there is actually so much more value in living a non-violent life. And it's a really charming story. The best villains can garner sympathy from the audience. Magneto is a Holocaust survivor that knows man's capacity to dehumanize other people. Killmonger from the Black Panther was an abandoned child. Yes, well, you hit the nail on its head, because my bad guy, and he is introduced in the prologue, and he does something horrific. It's like, it reminds me a bit of the Joker in the Nolan movie, you know. It's like really, really evil. And then, of course, for most of the first and the second and even the third act, we know that he's betraying the friendship. So he's not being genuine. He's out there to hurt. And then, but what we learn towards the end is that everything he does is motivated by something that happened to him, or happened to his mother, in fact. And it has a very, very strong bond with the magic that's happening in the tower. But that will only be revealed towards the end, where all of a sudden you're like, oh, of course, that's why he does this. That is what motivates him. And hopefully that will work. I think it will, because it was the moment I got that, I was like, oh wow, yeah, that makes so much sense. And it also is going to be so important for him to overcome that trauma. And once he does, once he heals, that's where he will make the right choice. So yes, I'm discussing the fantasy story here. And in case you're curious, I basically recorded an update every single day. It's a lot, I know. Not everybody's going to watch this, but I hope to do like a summary episode, maybe once a week or something like that. Like do one video where it's just, hey, if you're just starting the series, this is what the story is, and then you can just follow it without having to go back and watch 36 episodes. Joseph says, thank you for your videos. I watched Vinland Saga and Violet Evergarden because of your videos. Oh, that's so great to hear. Those are two of my favorite anime series. There's especially Vinland Saga. One of the reasons that I'm writing this medieval fantasy story is because of Vinland Saga. That just showed me the Middle Ages in from such a different perspective. And it showed me how much potential there is for storytelling and for a very emotional story. And so I'm often thinking of Vinland Saga, although my story is, of course, a fantasy story and not this very violent, vengeance story, at least the first season of Vinland Saga. But still, it happens in the same area. It happens in around the same time. I think Vinland Saga is probably a little bit later because this is also during the Viking invasions, whereas those are still in the future, at least in my first novel. Maybe in the second novel there will be Vikings. Looking forward to it. I'm already getting excited about writing the second book. I don't know if that is something to be excited about or just like, yeah, sure, dude. First write that first one. Just goes to show how much I'm enchanted by this story. Kisho Tenketsu is a group of guidelines to create a story or even argument, something like exposition, incident, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Yeah, it's very similar to the kind of story structure that I'm using as well. So I kind of use like a graph. Let's say this is the beginning of my story. So we're introduced. For me, I wanted to write a prologue to put you straight into the action. I learned that from George Lucas. So there's going to be these little like, oh, what the heck is happening there? And oh my goodness, what world is this? And then we start the normal life at the monastery, and we meet Tai and we meet Orla, and then there's a dragon. Ooh, what now? And then there's okay, we need to process this. And then, there's this desire. I need to become a scribe. Oh, and there's going to be this event. And then there's like, he's almost accepted and everything seems to go well. And then there is this catastrophic attack. And this like, everything changes. That's the inciting incident. And that's where my heroes have to make a choice. Are they going to stay where they are, or will they heed the call to adventure? But then they will lose their mentor. They will lose the safety of the monastery. So it's a huge risk. They may even lose their lives. And then they jump. So then we're about, where was I? So we do joop, then crisis. And then they start to climb. And then you have the second act. And the second act is like, oh, it's going so well. And we're learning and we're evolving. And success after success. And then here is another big like plot twist, revelation, crisis, something. And from there it goes down and down and down and down. And all that success is now kind of like contrasted with defeat after defeat after defeat. And of course the biggest defeat is the betrayal of friendship. And it's this crisis in their relationship, which is the heart of the story. And that plunges every single member of the team into a deep existential crisis. And then from the bottom of that, they start to build up again, because then they're going to face the one who's behind all this misery. And then you have this like crescendo, and then here all the way it's going to be the most exciting like denouement where everything comes together, where all is revealed, where we finally understand what's truly going on. And once we understand it with the group, then the real fight can happen, and then there's this big climactic battle where everything they have learned will have to be put in action. And this is also where they all have to make their new choices, not the ones that they would make at the beginning of the story, but the ones that are based on everything they've learned. And then of course we kind of like, okay, everything seems to be stable, and then there's going to be the credits and the thank you and all that, and then there's going to be an afterword. There's going to be a post-credit scene, and that of course sets up the next book. So there you go. That's kind of, and it sounds very similar to what you're describing here. The best characters have flaws that they manage to overcome. Absolutely. If a character doesn't evolve, then that person has no place in the story. Sakamoto Days. Thank you so much, Sakamoto Days. Steven says, thank you for the live session. Have to get back to work. Have a nice evening, you too. Thanks for stopping by. I need to start wrapping up myself as well. But it's wonderful that you're hopping by for the live stream. Do you want me to share a link to the doc that contains my story? Yeah, by all means, just send me a note. Yeah. If you go to my website, fatherroderick.com, there's a contact form, and you can just send me a link. I'd love to take a look at your story. Seth says, I can't stay long. Wanted to say hi. Keep the work going, Father, you and your fellow writers. Thank you so much. It's so kind of you to hop by and say hi. I really appreciate it. So yeah, we need to start wrapping up. So again, reminder for those of you that are part of my my supporters, there is going to be a live video group meeting in half an hour from now. So that's going to be at 8:30 Amsterdam time, 7:30 UTC, and that will be hosted by Michiel. And by the way, if you're watching this or live or maybe afterwards and you'd like to help me and support me, because everything, my entire salary comes from gifts, from donations. I'm not paid as a priest because I don't work in a parish. I do assist in a parish, but as a volunteer. And so thankfully I do have supporters. They used to be on Patreon, and now I've got my own system up at fatherroderick.com. But if you want to join them and want to join my community of supporters, my friends, then take a look at fatherroderick.com/join. So fatherroderick.com/join, and you'll find all the information. And, it's just based on small micro payments every month. Whatever you can miss, it all helps. Every bit helps. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking. I hope I didn't... like, it feels so much like an obsession, this story. It consumes me. Hopefully it's not too much, but maybe next week we'll talk a bit more about Star Wars. There was just not much Star Wars news to talk about. But and also, final reminder, if you aren't listening to my podcast Story Secrets yet, you need to check that out. So go to wherever you get your podcast and look for Story Secrets with Father Roderick. That is a daily show, 5 episodes every single day of the week, except for the weekend. And I love it. It's my favorite show to do because I talk about Star Wars. I talk about fantasy and about geeky things and cosplayers and writers. And it's, I love that show. So, but almost no one knows that it exists. So check it out. Story Secrets with Father Roderick. How do I send a note? If you go to my website, in the menu, you will see About Us or something like that. And then you can just get to the contact form there. Let me just look that up for you real quick. So fatherroderick.com. Oh, you found it. Very good, very good. Margot says, yeah, kind of crappy that the diocese doesn't pay you as a pastoral assistant. Well, now the parish pays me for each mass that I celebrate, but that doesn't pay the rent, obviously. That's, I think, $50 for the weekend. I think if I would race around like Peter Parker delivering pizzas, I'd probably make more money. Anyway, Do I go to Comic Cons? Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you go to my main channel, Father Roderick, on YouTube, that's where I am currently posting a lot of the encounters and the interviews that I did on Comic Cons and fantasy fairs. That will be a very important series in the year to come. And in my podcast every week, there's also an interview with cosplayers, which is a ton of fun. And maybe I'll write a book about that as well. But not today. I'm going to relax, kind of let go of this frenetic writing frenetic frenzy. That's something that needs to be corrected, but in the second draft. But thank you so much for your encouraging words and for the company. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you, and we'll talk soon. Next week, same time, same place. Take care.